Whoa! Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. It is freezing outside this morning. It's not really like flaky snow, which is kind of disappointing. Like, you always want the first snow of the year to be like this beautiful, movie-esque snowfall where it's flaky and where it's beautiful, and but it's kind of like little pellets of ice, to be honest with you. It's like sleet, and it's like, ah, man, if it's gonna snow, and especially for the first snowfall of the year, it should be like this flaky, dusty, big like snowflakes where it like lands on your hand, and then you can actually see the intricacies of that snowflake. But it's not like that. This is just like a pellet of ice falling from the sky, and I'm not here for it. But I've got my coffee, and you got to look forward to the little things in life, right? Your coffee in the morning. I saw the dog this morning, took her outside, was enjoying that it wasn't like freezing out. It's really weird when it like rains or when it snows. It kind of gets a little bit warmer. So last night it was like pretty cold, and I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna snow, because it gets really cold right before it snows, but then when it finally snows, the temperature like goes up a little bit. I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a meteorologist, but I appreciate that it's not negative 40 degrees or polar vortex outside. So I was able to go outside in just, my normal coat and my PJ pants, and I wasn't freezing to death. So there's things to look forward to, a ton of news to look forward to. Good morning. Christ is King. It's great that you're joining me this morning. So we are going to be getting into a lot of RFK Jr., who's supporting him, because this was weird. I had to double check. I had to make sure. I saw the headline and I was like, no way. She actually threw her support behind RFK Jr. It's Dr. Deborah Birx. Uh, Infamously, right? Donald Trump kind of trolled her. This is how you know Donald Trump was totally against all of the bureaucracy. And now that he's going in for a second go, and I think God puts things in place for a reason. Like I said, when Donald Trump won the 2024 election, it's clearly a part of a plan, God's plan, because, in 2020, he would have gone in, he wouldn't have had the Senate, and he wouldn't have had the House either. Sometimes I think things happen the way they do. So now he's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the popular vote, he's got all of this going into this, and he's gained all kinds of knowledge. So he had to go through 2020, Donald Trump, and he had to deal with people like Deborah Birx in order to understand next time he goes in and does his term and leads the country. He's got to understand that these people will always stab you in the back. They're bureaucrats. The Dr. Deborah Birx. So at the time, I will never forget the video of Donald Trump trolling Deborah Birx. She gets up there and she's like, I had the sniffles, and, I tested negative, but I still stayed home and I quarantined myself off from my family and my friends. Which it wasn't true. She was out there and she was doing all kinds of, I think she went for Thanksgiving vacation at the time, and she was telling you to stay away from your family members. So a complete hypocrite, rules for thee but not for me kind of woman. And Donald Trump, rolled his eyes at her and he kind of goes, oh no, oh no. And like he was trolling her. It's a great clip. And back then he knew that these people were bureaucrats and that they were elitists and they wanted to make rules for thee but not for me. I think back then he knew it, but he wasn't willing to act on it. Now when he goes in, I think that he's not going to make any room or leave any room for these people to push their edicts on the American people, and he's going to put America first and not listen to some of these so-called experts that surround the president, and he's going to keep his circle closer. I hope he does that. People with people he trusts. Matt Gaetz, there's probably plenty of people that could fill that attorney general slot. Matt Gaetz has gone through what many Americans have gone through, which is the weaponization of government. And they've went after him on all kinds of trumped up charges. Said he was trafficking a girl. There was no teeth to it. Of course, the investigation is dead. The DOJ has gone after him. So I think Donald Trump really wants Matt Gaetz, and it's a controversial pick, yes, because he's he's further right than some other candidates. But I think Donald Trump is hell-bent on surrounding himself around people whom he trusts and who have similar experiences as he does. So you've got two guys who have mugshots, by the way. You've got the Attorney General, and then you've got Donald Trump. They both got mugshots. The government has been weaponized against them. And he wants him as the Attorney General because he trusts him. So I think Donald Trump is going to do better surrounding himself with people whom he trusts. Dr. Deborah Birx, not a trustworthy character, but she's throwing her support behind RFK Jr. Interesting. We're going to be talking about Megyn Kelly, Scott Jennings. They're going bananas on Morning Joe Scarborough. Joe Scarborough, I haven't talked about it because, quite frankly, I really don't care. But Joe Scarborough and his wife, the co-host Mika, they bent the knee. They kneeled before Donald Trump, as they should, right? Or they should issue some sort of apology. They've called him Hitler all these years, and they are kneeling. And I think Megyn Kelly's reaction is the best. Scott Jennings has a good reaction as well to Morning Joe and his wife kind of apologizing to Donald Trump. So we're going to talk about that. Plus, the Illinois Department of Corrections, they kind of remain quiet on this issue. They haven't released any kind of statements. They haven't done any sort of hearings. This is, I guess, affecting a lot of jails and prisons in Illinois where you have inmates using drug-infused mail. They'll get mail, like physical mail, and then they'll take that mail and they'll smoke it. It's usually infused with cannabinoids, synthetic cannabis, or sometimes in some cases, you'll get fentanyl infused mail. Apparently, this is a problem. I agree. I think that this is a problem. I mean, I did some quick research. It looks like it's really in Cook County, the Cook County jail. I mean, there was one correctional officer who brought it or was going or planned to bring in, had intention to bring in 48 infused drug mail, like pieces of paper, and it was infused with drugs. She had 48 of it in their house. It was in her house, and it was seized. So she was charged with that. I don't know if she's necessarily convicted, but it seems to be a problem. A couple of guys have died. A couple of inmates have died due to this issue where they're smoking up, drug-infused mail. This story, the main thing that comes to my mind is, man, wouldn't it be great if they could put that know-how or that energy into, I don't know, contributing to society, not trying to get your hands on drugs. I always think that when convicts come up with, or prisoners come up with some sort of way to get around, the contraband rules, they somehow manage to find out a way to get contraband in. Man, if they just applied themselves in a positive way, there would be so much that they could get done. There needs to be something done, but I do think, and a lot of Republicans are going to be mad when I say this, but I do think that they are jumping the gun here. I think that they are a little, and you're like, wow, Kat, the Republican. I'm not for taking away people's their right to communication, to speech. Although you are a felon and you're an inmate, I don't think that writing a sweeping law that bans physical mail from entering the prison is a good move, because you're going to cause a lot of issues amongst the inmates as well. You'll have an inmate maybe that wasn't participating in this drug-infused mail, and now they don't get birthday cards from their kid anymore, and you're going to cause some issues amongst the inmates if you take away the mail as well. And you're punishing, a fraction of the inmates who probably are doing this, getting drug-infused mail sent to them and smoking up the paper in the prison. But a fraction of them are doing it, but you're going to write sweeping legislation that bans it for everybody. And, I've changed my positions a lot, especially when it comes to incarceration, because you never know if the government is going to be weaponized against you. Think of the J6ers, and you're going to be wrongfully imprisoned. And I always think about that. Now there are scum of the earth that deserve 100%. I think the death penalty. I have changed my positions on that a lot. Laken Riley, her killer, actually was just sentenced to life without parole. The possibility of parole, good. People are calling for the death penalty. I've changed my position on this. This guy, though, if anybody deserves the death penalty, it would be Laken Riley's killer. But we're going to get to that story a little bit later. I've changed my position on it a lot. I think that we need to figure out who's bringing the contraband in, okay, and then hold those people accountable. I think that a lot of times that we do reactive policy in the state of Illinois, we react to a situation and we don't actually understand how that situation started. For example, I always point to this one. It's silly legislation. They banned like kangaroos and serval cats and these big cats from people owning them as pets because there was one little girl somewhere that encountered a serval cat and the cat hissed at her. Okay. And then we wrote sweeping legislation to ban it. We probably should look at the situation, figure out, how many people actually have serval cats and how are they being housed? Is there a way to keep the serval cat from getting out? And these are questions that your lawmakers should be engaging in. One, you got the Department of Corrections. They're not even doing a hearing. They're not sitting down with anybody. They are going to probably implement, and they've talked about implementing a pilot program that scans physical mail, and then provides it to the inmates via electronically. But I think that there needs to be a sit down. There needs to be some data. There needs to be a conversation that happens. How big of a problem is this? Is it an isolated issue? Is it only happening in Cook County? Who are the bad actors who are bringing in that contraband? The family members who are possibly bringing in the mail or mailing it to. We've got to, launch an investigation into who's actually mailing these drug-infused paper to the inmates. We have to figure that out. So I'm going to get to that. But first, I do want to start with Deborah Birx. I got to take a quick break. You've got so much news ahead, so you won't want to miss a single bit of this show. We're on until 8. Don't miss the show at all today. I'll be right back. It's Conservative Cat. Yeah, the Apostle Paul was in prison 3 times for over 5 years. Yeah. Yep. Saul turned Paul. Love Apostle Paul. I actually just did a lesson with my youth group about the Apostle Paul. And the more and more I get older, the more I realize I used to be big death penalty. Like, yes, if you kill somebody, Old Testament, I think it says eye for an eye or something like that, where in the Old Testament it was okay and it was seen as just. And to a degree, I understand if you kill somebody, the only way that can be reconciled is if you are then in turn killed. But I've changed my positions a lot, being that I've seen the government weaponized against people that I know on a personal level, J6ers, right? The government has been weaponized against them. So I could see where, here, this is a government overreach and this is not good for the inmates and the inmates that are just trying to serve their time. I think that a lot of inmates probably are just trying to serve their time, but you do have those bad inmates and these convicts who will never be, what's the word? they'll never re-enter society as a good person. You have those people, and they should serve their time and be in prison for life, okay? And they shouldn't see the light of day. You have those types of people who just cannot join society. But there are some, and I would say the majority, who are trying to, get to a place where they can rejoin society and be a contributing member. So, yeah, this is going to be quite the story. Drug-infused male inmates, I mean, just the stuff that they come up with. Some convicts, you put a criminal in a room, and, say, hey, figure out a way to get contraband into this prison. They'll figure it out. Okay, so you got a lot of time on your hands to think about this stuff as well. So that is happening. I'm not disparaging that at all, and I'm not saying that that's not happening, but I think that writing sweeping legislation like a ban against everybody, possibly the Apostle Pauls of prison, right? People who are in prison for no reason, really. I think that you might have people like that. I believe that more and more every day. Especially considering we've got things like the Safety Act here in Illinois. I would think that they release these violent criminals and then they keep the righteous people or the people who did nothing wrong in prison. Things are backwards nowadays in the criminal justice reform complex, right? That just is backwards. We'll let violent criminals out to go commit tons of crime, and we don't keep them in prison. Our prisons are empty for the most part in Illinois. So, but I do think that this is I'm not saying that it's not a real problem. It's definitely a real problem. Correctional officers, they're hacking up, they're going to the hospital, possibly dying from inhaling this stuff. It's synthetic. Okay. So you can overdose on it. You've got inmates who died already, a couple of them in Cook County from overdosing on things like fentanyl, opioids, drug-infused mail. They're smoking it. It's nasty. We've got to do something. I think that the correct course of action would be to assign a bunch of guys, maybe in districts, and assign a bunch of guys to conduct an investigation. And I'd imagine that they have this, like a contraband division within the prison. And what they do is they investigate and they bring charges against people who bring contraband in. This IDOC worker, she's probably got the union behind her, but the IDOC worker who brought the contraband in and is accused of it, she had 48 drug-infused pieces of paper in her house. That's what they seized. She should be, I hate to say it, but made an example, right? We should make an example out of her and really come down hard on her and charge her with a crime that forces her back or forces her into a prison. That's not okay to bring contraband into a prison. You're jeopardizing the health and safety of so many people. And they should come down hard on her like a ton of bricks. So anybody who brings contraband in, or family members of these prisoners who are mailing them birthday cards that are infused with drugs, those family members should get the book thrown at them, right? And they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And that's how you got to make an example out of the people who are willing to bring contraband into the prison system. That's my opinion. That's how I think you get after this is, you bring contraband into the prison, we should compare that to attempted murder. Okay. Charge them with attempted murder because contraband is there's all kinds of things felons, convicts can do with contraband. So we're going to get to that, but first I want to get to Deborah Birx. Hey, good morning. I so do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. I appreciate you tuning in on this cold winter morning. Yes, it is snowing outside. I woke up and I was like, I looked up and there's these little icicles falling from the sky. Not the Hallmark snow. I want the Hallmark snow. Yes. If it's gonna snow, it's got to be the Hallmark snow, especially the first snow of the year, right? Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about Deborah Birx. Deborah Birx. So she is a bureaucrat, and she's actually throwing her support behind JFK, which is really interesting. Dr. Deborah Birx is ready for transparency now that RFK Jr. is prepared to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. However, it's unclear why she's excited about government accountability when she followed behind Fauci's every move, his arbitrary trail during the pandemic. She was totally cool with just falling in line with Tony Fauci. She wasn't questioning him. She wasn't questioning, hey, any doctor that tells you, oh, I tested negative for COVID-19, I had some sniffles, but I isolated myself anyway, and I stayed, and they recommend you isolate yourself from your friends and family, run far away from that doctor. There's nothing worse than isolating yourself when you're sick. I think, like, obviously, if you have a cold or something, don't go coughing on people, but like to isolate yourself from friends and family. You need your friends and family, especially in the nursing homes, right? You had people who were, sick or were needing that human interaction. They needed that to get better, or they need that human interaction. And I think we just had this knee-jerk response, like always. And she's backing transparency now, but she wasn't transparent probably for her entire 40 years of her bureaucratic career. So it's kind of weird that she's backing RFK Jr. now. Perhaps she wants to avoid any kind of accountability where, the department holds her accountable for her actions during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think Fauci should be charged, cuffed, Deborah Birx as an accomplice. They destroyed businesses, families, children by locking down this country with their stupid, arbitrary mandates. Birx claims to not only back RFK Jr. in his new potential role, but actually is excited that in a Senate hearing, he would bring forward his data. However, the fact that knowing data brings excitement means nominees are often incompetent, and that's deeply concerning. Okay, so she's excited that he's going to bring the data. Don't you have the data yourself? It's kind of deeply concerning that you're excited to hear from RFK Jr. Aren't you like 40 years bureaucrat? You're supposed to be the expert when it comes to the data. With the COVID-19 vaccine, probably he's going to be asked about this in the Senate hearing. And he's going to bring forward all kinds of injury data, vaccine injury data. One thing that he wants to do, which should have been done a long time ago, is repeal the 1986 childhood, I think it's the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, something like that. And it shields the vaccine manufacturers from being held liable for injury. And nowhere else does that exist. Okay. If I own the vaping companies, right? Dick Durbin is really against the vaping industry. The vaping industry, if there's an injury that takes place when somebody uses their product, they're going to be held liable, and somebody can bring a suit against them if they get sick from vaping or if they're injured while vaping. No other industry exists where you're not held liable except the vaccine industry, which makes absolutely no sense. But here's Deborah Birx on Facebook.
This is the reality of America. And so what I'm hoping is he brings his transparency for all Americans, and we really start to tackle these issues one by one by one. I think everybody across America wants to have healthy kids that they know will grow up and not end up with the complications of diabetes or heart disease.
It was very hard for Michelle Obama when she was first lady to get any of that done. And it might be hard for lawmakers who come from some of those agricultural states to vote against their own interests in terms of the farm subsidies and the like.
Well, we're not talking about eliminating good food. We're talking about using all of their ingredients in a way that is more healthy for Americans. And I think that's what people are calling for now.
Mm-hmm.
Europe did it years ago. And I think we're capable of doing that. We are really smart, high levels of technology. We can make food tasty without a lot of these additives because we can see that other groups are doing it in a small way. So we're not talking about eliminating the need for wheats and grains. We're talking about putting those together in a healthy way.
Mhm. I want to ask you as well about some of the things he said about vaccines. As you know, the vaccination rates are declining in America. He said things like restoring transparency around them. It's not really clear what that means. Why do you think there's a decline in vaccination?
I think there's two pieces to it. I think when we talk about things in public health, we don't acknowledge the concerns. Because when my children went to school, there was maybe 1 in 1,000 kids with autism, diagnosed autisms. Now it's 3 per 100. So every mom is seeing a classroom of kindergartners where one of the children has autism. That's scary to moms and dads. They want to know why. So it's not good enough for us to just say vaccines don't cause autism. It's us finding what is the cause of autism
Well, I
and
think a lot of
reverse
people
it.
would absolutely agree
Yeah.
that it is ridiculous that there isn't a lot of
Yes.
research and established causation
Yes.
of autism. But what he has said in the past is that autism is caused by vaccines. And there's no scientific basis for that conclusion, as I understand it.
That's correct. And so that's why when he talks about transparency, I'm actually excited that in a Senate hearing, he would bring forward his data and the questions that come from the senators would bring forth their data. What I know for sure is he's a very smart man who can bring his data and his evidence base forward, and we can have a discussion that many Americans believe already is a problem. So until we can have that transparency and that open discussion from both sides, I know the members have incredible staffers who will bring great questions from their constituents, and that hearing would be a way for Americans to really see the data that you're talking about, that we can't see that causation right now, but what is causing it? And so you're absolutely right. Addressing what the cause is will be critical. And I think what has confused people is we weren't clear about what COVID vaccines do and don't. And so now people are questioning, well, what do my childhood vaccines do and don't? And they don't understand that some of the vaccines that their children are getting protect them from both disease and create herd immunity. And some of them that they get are just for their child, like H flu and pneumovax to protect their child from getting very serious illness. And we're just not.
All right. So, number one, what RFK Jr. really wants to do is what Europe does. And they have like a way of studying vaccines that is far more transparent than what we're currently doing here in the United States, where they use a placebo and blind studies. And we don't do that here, and we don't study our vaccines nearly enough here in the United States. They do it in Europe. They do it in other places, much like the food. They don't have the additives in their food or the chemicals in their food or the dyes in their food. Europe does it. Why don't we? So Deborah Birx, who served as President Donald Trump's COVID response coordinator, said that she's optimistic about the nomination of RFK Jr. To lead the Department of Health and Human Services and hopes he will bring transparency to the healthcare debate in America. So she did admit, she goes, yeah, the people in public health, they're not transparent with it. And when we have questions, when mothers are encountering kids with autism at an alarming rate in the classroom, and the likelihood that you'll have an interaction with a kid with autism in the classroom is so much higher now than it used to be. And now we're questioning, hey, is it because of the vaccines and the abysmal COVID-19 vaccine? They lied to us. They told us it was safe, that it was effective. It's not safe and effective. You get COVID 3-4 times. Dick Durbin touted that he was boosted like 7 times, and he has gotten COVID 3 times. Clearly, it's not effective. You still get COVID-19 when taking the COVID vaccine. It can have vaccine injuries when taking the COVID-19 vaccine, myocarditis. We know this now, and all we've always wanted out of public health is just a bit of transparency, and not to be called lunatics or nuts or conspiracy theorists when we raise the question, hey, why are the kids getting autism? Why is it I still get COVID-19 when I've been triple boosted? Okay, so how come she's not calling for transparency when she backed the idea of muzzling kids, the nation's kids, and banning them from education for reasons that will never be moral? Okay, she banned the kids from the classrooms from education. She masked 2, 3-year-olds, okay? This is Deborah Birx. Why all of a sudden she's got this interest in healthier foods and vaccine risks and being transparent? So she says this. When he talks about transparency, I'm actually excited to hear in the Senate hearing what he's going to bring forward as far as his data and the questions that come from the senators and what kind of data the senators are going to bring forward. That's really concerning because she's supposed to be at the top of her field, right? 40 years experience, 40-year bureaucrat. Why doesn't she have the data that RFK Jr. has? She has the government at her disposal, the taxpayer at her disposal. Money isn't an option. How come RFK Jr. can come to these conclusions and she can't? Birx said that Kennedy is championing healthier food, and that's appealing to Americans. Yeah. She says, this is the reality of America, and and I'm hoping he brings his transparency for all Americans, and we really want to start to tackle these issues one by one. I think everybody across America wants healthy kids, and I know that they will grow up and parents want them to grow up and know that they're not going to end up with complications like diabetes or heart disease. So what I'm so confused about is why all of a sudden is Deborah Birx coming out and calling for transparency when she should have done that while she was the COVID response coordinator, serving under President Donald Trump. All right, I do need to take a quick break, but I'll be right back. It's Conservative Cat. Yeah, I can't help but think, all of a sudden she's doing this and she's calling for transparency when it comes to vaccine injuries. She's had 40 years to call for transparency to address healthy food, and why they're putting chemicals in the food, and to repeal this 1986 act where we don't hold vaccine manufacturers liable. She's had 40 years to do this crap, and she hasn't done it. So I don't know why all of a sudden she's pro transparency and pro getting to the bottom of vaccine injuries. Could it be she's trying to shield herself from any kind of accountability or she is the guy next to Fauci who lied to the American people about the efficacy and the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine. She doesn't want to be charged, folks. That's why all the sudden turnaround and the call for transparency. She does not want to be charged with really, it should be reckless endangerment of children, recommending that children take this COVID vaccine when, in fact, they were calling for children to be vaccinated, and they did no studies, absolutely no studies. I actually talked to Moms for Liberty, the Lake County chair. She was dynamic. She's 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and she told me, she goes, back then when Dick Durbin was calling for everybody to be vaccinated with this emergency, it was approved for emergency purposes. When he was calling for everybody to be vaccinated, she goes, at that stage, there's no way, she said, oftentimes vaccines at that stage are duds, they're failures. And to be calling for everybody to get vaccinated at that stage, the experts were calling for you to get vaccinated, was just reckless. And it was quack science, as Dick Durbin said that, RFK Jr. engages in. Actually, he was engaging in quack science when he was recommending you take a vaccine that was approved for emergency purposes only. He was pushing that on children. That's actually quack science. So a lot of these people are going to start to, I hope, be held accountable. I think RFK Jr., once he gets in there into the department, he's going to realize who approved all of this, who was at the helm of the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act, which shields vaccine manufacturers from being held accountable when children die or get sick or are injured from the vaccines. And I think that she knows there is a new dawn, there is a new day, and there's a new sheriff in town, and she is not going to get away with what she's gotten away with all these years. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see some of these people come out of the woodwork and apologize, really. I mean, they're apologizing. They're, all of a sudden supportive of Donald Trump. I think it's because they really don't want to be held accountable for their actions. And I hope that Donald Trump does not let this go. This woman, along with Tony Fauci, closed up businesses, recommended children be masked. That was just a nightmare. So she actually demanded you forego Thanksgiving celebrations during the pandemic, and that was like mocking you, because guess what she did? She traveled with her family, a family from a different household, by the way, so extended family, and all the while she told you not to do that. See, rules for thee, but not for me. Do you think those standards are what she means when she calls for transparency? Because yes, let's be transparent, but you're not omitted, or you're not going to be excluded from the transparency process, and from from people looking into you and what you've done in your 40 years of bureaucratic service. Okay, so there's no doubt that the people took advice from her, advice about not going to Thanksgiving dinner with your families, and you missed out on life events. And she didn't even follow her own recommendations. Okay, Fauci didn't follow his own recommendations, and they demanded that you follow these recommendations. They're morally corrupt. That would be an understatement. The reason the country needs somebody like RFK Jr. to lead the HHS is because the bureaucrats like her, who put the science, the political science, over the actual science, that's why why we need somebody like RFK Jr. in place. It's because of people like her. And she's saying, oh, we need to have a transparent process. She's shielding herself from any kind of accountability there. She's trying to get out ahead of this thing, and she wants to, look as if she's, oh, I have nothing to hide. You have everything. You are the reason why we're in this mess, because you, Tony Fauci, other expert bureaucrats, put the political science over the actual science, and you got away with it. But I hope not. I hope RFK Jr. gets in there, Donald Trump, and they don't let these people get away with it. His nomination really could come at a more crucial time. America's health is just completely suffered at this bureaucratic incompetence for far, far too long. And she's been a part of this system for 40 years. Okay. And all of a sudden now she's about vaccine injuries, and she's about healthier food. Give me a break. Give me a break. You're protecting your ass. She's protecting herself. She's protecting her butt, folks. Okay, that's Deborah Birx. Okay, that's why she's coming out, and she's all concerned now about vaccine injuries and healthier food. She's been in this system for 40 years. She's a bureaucrat. Do you remember during Thanksgiving? We're coming up on Thanksgiving this year. During Thanksgiving, she asked you to forego those celebrations. She told you to not be with your family during the pandemic and to go to Thanksgiving dinner. But guess what she did? She traveled with a family from a different household, by the way, during Thanksgiving. So rules for thee, but not for me. Do you think that those are the standards? What she means when she calls for transparency? Are the bureaucrats following their recommendations that they provide the American people? Or are they just creating these edicts and these mandates for the American people to follow, and they don't bother to follow their own recommendations? There's no doubt in my mind that people actually took this woman's advice, took Tony Fauci's advice, and they missed out on life events. And all the while, they weren't even following their own recommendations that they were recommending everybody follow. Okay. So to call that morally corrupt is an understatement. It's hypocritical. It's awful. And you've got this woman, a part of the system for 40 years, who the country so desperately needs somebody like RFK Jr. to lead the HHS, because these bureaucrats like her have put the political science over the actual science for decades. And his nomination could not come at a more crucial time, because Americans' health is suffering. We're suffering. We've got diseases, chronic diseases, diabetes, vaccine injuries like myocarditis. And all of that is because of her government incompetence, her bureaucratic incompetence. And she's been in there for far too long. And it's precisely she's precisely a reason why this system is so broken. The health in America is so broken. It's because of her. And she is trying to cover her own butt with this whole calls for transparency thing. Why wasn't she doing that when she was masking up your children and demanding that they forego their education? All of a sudden, she's for transparency. Give me a break. For 40 years, you could have looked into the vaccine injuries caused by either COVID-19 or any of the vaccines. You could have looked into the vaccine injuries, or repealed the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act, where it allows vaccine manufacturers, to not be held liable for injuries. Nowhere else on the planet is there an industry that gets away with that kind of stuff. If you sell a lemon, if you sell a bad car, right, you will be held liable. Somebody can sue you for selling them a lemon. Okay, in the car industry, in the car dealership industry, you can't sell people crap cars and get away with it and lie to people. And that car, down the road, the brakes come off, or the brake lines aren't in the car, and then you sold them the lemon, they'll come and they'll sue you. That should be the case for vaccine manufacturers. If your child dies as a result of the COVID-19 vaccine, you should be able to bring a suit against the vaccine manufacturer. I mean, that's just the way life goes. All right, I do have to talk about Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. So from what I understand, they're a couple. I don't know why she doesn't go by Mika Scarborough. She goes by Brzezinski. But they host this show. It's called Morning Joe. And they're waving the white flag of surrender, folks, just like Deborah Birx here, okay? They're all kneeling. They're all kneeling. They're all apologizing. They're all trying to say that they're for transparency and for working things out, okay? So Mika and Joe, they actually waved the white flag and they surrendered, and they said they're working things out with Donald Trump. You knew people were going to have scorching takes when you had Joe and Mika, who have called Trump Hitler for the past 8 years. They've called him Hitler, and now all of a sudden they're waving the white flag of surrender, and they're saying, "Oh, we're committed to working things out with Donald Trump." And I'm just so excited to get to talk with the other side of the aisle. All of a sudden they're doing so. There of course was scorching hot takes from Megyn Kelly. Then you had a scorching hot take from Scott Jennings, and I want to get there. I want to get to those takes because I think they're hilarious. So we'll be right back. I'm going to play those clips. Megyn Kelly said it best, in my opinion, but Scott Jennings had a good reaction as well. These are the people from the beginning of time, from when Trump launched his career in politics, okay? In 2016, they've been calling him Hitler, a fascist. They said he held a Nazi rally. I mean, come on. All of that rhetoric came from the left, from the Democrats, from the White House, from Kamala Harris, and everybody knows it. And it was a bunch of BS. They didn't mean any of it. Of course, they didn't mean any of it. They wanted to try to corrupt the American people's opinions by saying these inflammatory, exaggerated statements about Donald Trump. So I'm going to be right back. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. I so do appreciate you tuning in each and every single day. Yes, scorchy takes on Joe Scarborough and his wife, Mika Brzezinski. They're waving the flag of surrender. They're saying that they're working things out with Donald Trump. You know, they got on their show and they said, "Oh, we met with Donald Trump and we're working things out with Donald Trump. We don't agree on everything, but we're working things out with them." Like, come on, give me a break. So we're going to check in on our two favorite liberals, Joe and Mika, and, and Megyn Kelly and Scott Jennings. They had the scorchiest of takes. Jennings was shocked that Joe and Mika would be so quick to meet Hitler. Okay, they've been calling him Hitler for 8 years, and he was shocked that they actually sat down and they met with Hitler and they talked about it on their show. So let's take a listen to Scott Jennings' take on Joe and Mika kind of waving the white flag of surrender and saying that they pretty much apologized or worked things out with Donald Trump.
I'm amazed. I did not expect Hitler to get so many meeting requests. First from Joe Biden, now from Mika and Joe. It's amazing that literal Hitler is getting all these meeting requests. And what it tells me, Professor, is that all the rhetoric that came from the left, from the Democrats, from the White House, from Kamala Harris and everyone else before the election, all of the rhetoric, the fascism, the Hitler, the Nazi rally, it was all a bunch of BS. They didn't mean any of it. And if I were in the Democrat sort of rabble's shoes, I would be looking at all my leaders and going, did you just BS me for an entire 6 weeks before the election?
I just reread.
I'm amazed. I did not expect Hitler to get.
Yeah, I would imagine that all of the Democrat voters are looking at these Democrat elitists, the Joes and Mikas of the world, and they were like, wait a second. So you just met with literal Hitler, as you had said. You're either lying to me or you don't mind meeting with literal Hitler, which is it, right? So Megyn Kelly, she was way saltier than Scott Jennings. Can't play it on the radio, but she said, "Go bleep yourself, you dishonest jokes of faux journalists." That's what Megyn Kelly said. So the funny thing about Joe and Mika, groveling is that, it was right for them to do so. I didn't expect anything else, or I'm not expecting anything else from any other journalism or either. At the start of this new administration, yeah, you should be. You called the guy Hitler, okay? Not that I think Donald Trump is going to go in and I think that he's going to gut or at least put some regulation on these media outlets where they're not able to, take advertising dollars from big pharma and not do stories on big pharma or outs these people or outs people like Tony Fauci because they're getting paid by those people. I hope that we can figure out something where the media is kind of held accountable for their actions. But the journalismers, they're going to be out there and they're going to be, groveling. They're going to be waving the white flag. But I really don't care. You could go pound sand. Your apologies, your surrendering. Go pound sand. For years, 8 years, you lied to the American people, and we're never coming back. We're never going to give you the viewership that you want because you lied. MSNBC, they have, of course, Joy Reid. She's the most racist host in America. And people like Nicole Wallace, they're so detestable. Nicole Wallace is actually so detestable that it was John McCain's dying wish that she not show up to the funeral. Yeah, look it up. It's actually kind of funny story. But Joe and Mika are both, for whatever reason, revered. I don't know why they're revered or why they're seen. Maybe it's because it's a power couple dynamic they've got going on. But they shouldn't be revered because they straight up lied. They were willing and they begged for a meeting with whom they called literal Hitler. All right, I do have to take a quick break, but we're going to be back at the top of the hour talking about Illinois correctional officers who've reported symptoms after handling inmates' mails, and now Republicans are calling to suspend or electronically scan physical mail for the inmates. We've got that story ahead here on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. welcome to the Red Kingdom. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the Noobs and Talk of Bloomington Normal. Text me 309-451-9299. Woke up this morning, had a couple of snowflakes fall on my head. Not the good kind, though. It's like it's icicles. They're not really like the flaky Hallmark snowflakes. And I'm disappointed. I wish that the first snow, every year, if it's going to snow, I hope that the first snow is like this beautiful dusting of snowflakes. But nope, it never turns out that way. It's always like a mixture of like sleet and icicles. But at least it's not as cold. Last night, I think it was colder last night than it was this morning. And I think when the snow happens, it actually gets a little bit warmer. I don't know what that is, what the science is behind that, but I'm here for it. As long as it's not -40, I think I'm all right. As long as I got a hot piping cup of coffee and some hot news, which we're going to get to here in just a second. I want to get to the Illinois Department of Corrections. The correctional officers, they're reporting overdose symptoms after handling inmates' mail, like their physical mail. And now Republicans are calling to suspend or electronically scan incoming mail for inmates. We're going to get to that here in just a second. Before we took the break in the 6 o'clock hour, I was talking about, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, and Mika. They were claiming for weeks that Joe Biden is the best he's ever been. Joe Biden actually celebrated, I think it was his 82nd birthday yesterday. But he's sharp as a tack, that one. They claimed for weeks and weeks and weeks that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. He's the best he's ever been. And then it took Democrats to decide that he was no longer, relevant or helpful to the party to oust him from re-election. And then all of a sudden they got on board, the Democrats. As soon as the Democrats decided they were done with Joe Biden, then Joe and Mika hopped on board and said that Joe Biden was experiencing an obviously in cognitive decline. Okay. But it was fake news to point it out before the Democrats gave them the green light. That was so embarrassing, by the way. You've got Joe and Mika out there constantly saying, oh, Joe is sharp as a tack. He doesn't have any cognitive decline. When we have eyeballs, we can see that Joe's in cognitive decline. And then all of a sudden they flipped the script as soon as the Democrats chewed him up and spit him out, Joe Biden. So they also claimed that, Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally resembled a Nazi one. But they met with the head Nazi in charge to work things out. They begged to meet Donald Trump, and they met Donald Trump, and they said that they wanted to work things out with Hitler. Okay, you called him a Nazi, okay, and you accused him of holding Nazi rallies. Whereas Joe and Mika, they present news as if they are like these historical figures, or like they're like at the helm of diplomacy, and it's just like such a desperate attempt at saving their ratings, like to act as if you are like so revered. And they delivered this news of meeting with Donald Trump and trying to work things out as if they're, staples in American society. Nobody even watches you. Nobody even knows really who you are. I do, because I'm forced to watch this stuff and relay it back to you. But Megyn Kelly said it best. She said, you guys are, go bleep yourselves. You guys are dishonest jokes of faux journalists. And I love that. I love that for Megyn Kelly. Scott Jennings had a great take as well. He goes, I'm shocked at how Joe and Mika were so quick to meet with Hitler. All right, I do want to talk about this correctional officers. They're reporting these overdose symptoms now, and they're handling the inmates' physical mail. And now you have Republicans, lawmakers, who are calling to suspend physical mail. And instead of physical mail, you'll electronically scan it for the inmates. So the incoming mail gets scanned, and then you electronically scan it, and then they can read the mail via like a tablet or something like that. Now, there was a recent contract with these tablets, so I'm pretty sure at a state level, a lot of inmates are going to be getting tablets. Okay, so, or at least some tablets are going to be in the prisons where, they're shared devices and they can communicate with their loved ones that way. Now, shockingly, I know you're thinking that I'm going to take the position of the Republican here. I don't think that the Democrats or the Republicans have the correct response when it comes to this physical mail situation. You've got Democrats writing a letter urging the IDOC, the Illinois Department of Corrections, to allow inmates to receive their original physical mail. And then in a news conference, you've got Representative Charles Meyer. He's a Republican. He said that the acting IDOC director, LaToya Hughes, at the very least, owes Illinoisans a hearing where she can listen to the problems that the officers are facing and try to come up with some solutions. That is actually, now some Republicans are calling for the complete elimination of physical mail. I think that's a knee-jerk reaction. As I opened up the program, I was talking about how my thoughts on incarcerated people, inmates, have kind of changed over time because of the weaponization of government. Okay, I've seen people wrongfully convicted. We all have. President Donald Trump wrongfully convicted. Matt Gaetz wrongfully charged with the DOJ investigation. They said that he was sex trafficking this 17-year-old girl. Nothing came out of it. But I've seen the government weaponized against people. So it's a bit alarming when you want to cut off, physical mail or physical forms of communication or any communication that people on the inside have. So it could, more likely than that, they deserve to be there. But there's some people who are just trying to do their time. And, what's wrong with them receiving a physical birthday card? However, I do see an issue here. In Cook County, there are several instances. In fact, people have died as a result of this mail being drug infused. So you have physical mail that inmates are getting that are drug infused with either fentanyl or cannabis, and they're smoking it up. People are getting high from it. The correctional officers are getting high and having to go to the hospital. In some cases, you've got a couple of inmates actually dying from overdoses related to opioid infused drug, like mail, like physical mail, paper, drug infused paper, and they're smoking it and they're taking the drugs. Now, we need to have a hearing from the IDOC. The acting director, LaToya Hughes, totally incompetent, should not be in that position. She's an acting director. She shouldn't be there. But she needs to sit down, being that she is the acting director. She needs to sit down and listen to the problems at least. And we all need to come up with a solution quickly because there are people dying. There was like 2 cases where 2 guys at least died. But the main thing is trying to figure out how the contraband is getting in, who is getting the contraband in, because either way, somebody's getting that in, whether it be a family member who's mailing the drug-infused paper into the inmates, or a correctional officer. In this case, in Cook County, there was a correctional officer who had 4, at least it was seized, and she's been charged. I don't know if she's been convicted yet. I got to look that up, but she was at least charged with it, and then they seized 48 little slips of paper that were drug infused. So is this coming in through the staff? Is this coming in through family members? Is it in just one area? Are we seeing it really? Is it a prevalent problem in only Cook County? We need, and other states have gone to electronically scanning mail. I understand that we could do that right away, but I think that there's an underlying issue. We need to figure out if this is a coordinated, really, attack on our prisons. It's weird that it's happening across the nation. You would think that the Department of Corrections, like each prison, should have like a contraband division of correctional officers, and they could conduct investigations and figure out who's bringing it in. If we start there, and if we figure out who, how much, what they're bringing in, how do they get the drugs to be drug infused into this paper? What's that process of getting the drugs infused into that paper? If we can make it harder for people to do that kind of thing, I don't know how you do that kind of thing, but if we can make it harder for people to do that kind of thing, maybe we start there and we, outlaw certain materials that cause people to get their hands on, and then they can make this stuff. So Restore Justice outrage, they are just, one way or another is just not the solution here. Banning it and keeping the process just the same. We have to figure out something. So Julie Anderson, the Restore Justice Outreach Director, had said, in other states, rates of overdoses and drug use increased following the replacement of physical mail with mail scanning. So that's another thing, is if that's true, which I don't think it is. I think there's studies to back up both sides that it brought down overdoses when you ban physical mail from the inmates. She is citing these sources, and I think that these sources are legitimate. Some of the studies show that the rates go actually up. That just proves my point even more. Outright banning it, but also not doing something is not a fix, because they're going to figure out other ways to bring in the contraband. Okay. Now, if they don't do it through the physical mail, they're going to do it some other way. And you might actually see the overdoses increase because they'll figure out an easier way, or a way that isn't checked, because right now correctional officers check the physical mail and they wear gloves and they have to check the physical mail. If it's drug-infused paper, it's harder to figure that kind of stuff out. But there's got to be some sort of process set up to check the physical mail easier, or figure out how we're getting it into the prisons, the contraband. That's the important part. So I do want to also talk about David Freese. He's a Republican, and he suggested that the physical mail be scanned electronically amid reports that mail has been infused with contraband like cannabis, fentanyl, or even bug spray. So bug spray, they're going to get high off the bug sprays. That's really bad. I mean, you're just going to die or kill all your brain cells. Man, wouldn't it be great if the convicts and the prisoners, the inmates, they've put this effort into something productive? Maybe that's something that we need to do. We need to start, having them be productive members of society, rather than and giving them something to do that's productive. If they were to dedicate this much time to something positive, could you imagine? We'd probably have, inmates building rockets or designing rockets or something like that. But here we have David Freese. He says, I really am not buying this whole, you get the physical piece of paper and then you get that connection. No, I don't really buy it either. That's a stupid argument to say, oh, the physical piece of paper is something that you need. But anytime you have the government stepping in and limiting your communications or ways you communicate, I don't really like that. You've got, elderly people in prisons. They might not be as quippy with technology, or as well-versed with technology, or they might just, be protesting technology, or, you have people like that for religious reasons, really don't want to be around technology at all. You run into really tricky waters when you start to limit people's communications or means of communication. I don't like that. What's next? Are we going to ban physical communication, for the citizenry? It's a slippery slope you're going down when you start banning means of communication, or certain kinds of communication, just because it's easier on, you're the correctional officers, on the inmates. I understand. But there's got to be something else that we can do. And I think it starts with making an example out of people who bring contraband into prisons. If you are bringing contraband into prisons, I think you should be charged with attempted murder. If you're bringing in contraband with opioids, these people are vulnerable people in these prisons a lot of the times. Not all of them. A lot of them are, terrible people that deserve to be there, just like Laken Riley's killer. He actually was just recently sentenced to life in prison without parole. There's terrible people in prisons, but there's, I would say, a good amount of people who are trying to do their time and get out. You've got some vulnerable people in there, or mentally ill people. And if you are bringing in contraband, whether you're a correctional officer or if you are a vendor that the IDOC uses, and you do this, I think you should be charged with attempted murder. We need to throw the book at you. You need to be held to the highest. And really, that is the way I think you get at this problem, is you find out who's bringing the contraband in, slap a pair of cuffs on them, and make an example out of them. Really, you can't do that. And if people were deterred from committing that kind of crime, and if people were actually punished and the union, didn't back up the IDOC members to do that kind of thing, I think we would actually be in a much better spot. People would be afraid to bring in contraband. Right now, there's there's nothing really that deters people from bringing that kind of stuff in. All right, I do have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. We're going to get to Nancy Mace. She embarrassed this smug reporter, and she's doubling down on her position over, men being in women's bathrooms. Plus, we're going to get to the Senate confirmations of all of these judges. We'll be right back. It's Conservative Cat. Whoa, 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 whoa. Good morning. Hey, it's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9 The News and Talk Bloomington Normal. The executive director of the John Howard Association said and explained that understanding where the contraband is coming from and what kind of contraband is getting into the prison is the first step. Nobody's sitting down, nobody's talking to each other. We're just coming up with legislative uh, action before we even understand what's coming into the prison. We should probably enhance the penalties for people who bring in contraband. I think that is a way to really combat the problem. But we got to figure out who's bringing it in and what we do with people who bring in contraband. I think that is a start. And Jennifer Volin Katz suggested that the acting director do participate in the hearing because hearings can generate ideas and approaches to solving the problem. I think that they're talking past each other, the left and the Republicans. I really think that if there was just a hearing, and the IDUC sat down and talked about, the data and how bad of a problem this really is, because it's killing people, it's killing inmates, and it's sending our correctional officers to the hospital and with bad problems, breathing problems and things like that. So we need to come up with solutions and fast. But this is the officer. I said I'd do the homework here. She smuggled in drug-soaked paper into the Cook County Jail, and that was earlier this fall. So not convicted yet, but she was charged. She's a Cook County Correctionals deputy. Throw the book at her. I don't know what to say. If you bring in contraband, you need to be held to the highest, as much punitive action as possible against those people. Something comparable to attempted murder, really. If you're going to bring in opioid-soaked paper into prisons, you're just asking for problems or asking for people to be killed. These are dangerous people. Sometimes they're vulnerable people, and you're bringing in drug-soaked paper, sometimes paper even soaked with bug spray. Ridiculous. All right, Nancy Mace embarrassed this smug reporter. She's doubling down on her position. She's actually expanding that legislation where she bans men and women's bathrooms at the Capitol, on the Capitol grounds. She's expanding that to all federal property. So good for her. We're kicking off the holiday season right with some controversy about women in men's bathrooms. Republicans think women are women and men are men. Democrats think women are men who are pretending to be women or say that they're women. So at the center of the controversy is South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Now, I've never been a fan of Nancy Mace. I think I've got to disclose that here. I've always thought she's a bit of a rhino. I wouldn't be shocked if she's voted for every single Ukraine spending package. She's not exactly a MAGA Republican, but she is the face of this movement, which I think is great. I think that she's going after this, and I think it's 100% needed, especially considering we've got this newly elected Delaware congressman/woman, he, Sarah McBride, shattered the glass ceiling by becoming the first trans member of Congress. That's why we have to do something about this now, because it was never a problem before, because we never had to deal with trans Congress members. But this person is a radical activist, McBride. Even though every member of Congress has their own private bathroom, and then people are going to say, oh, well, why can't Nancy Mace use her own private bathroom and she doesn't? No, that's not fair. She is the woman here in this situation. McBride is coming into her space, and he's not supposed to be coming into her space. And he's demanding that he be able to use the women's bathrooms, despite him having his own personal bathroom. Okay, if you're the minority here, and if you are this is a very, very small group of people. Okay. If you are the minority, you should be using your own private bathroom, not demanding that all women see your peen. That's what this guy wants. He wants to go into the women's bathroom, although he has a peen. And, she's brought forward a resolution for her colleagues to follow basic principles of biology. And of course, this was the media is, of course, on the Democrat side. But let's take a listen to Nancy.
An extremist, I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man. If someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way. So that being a
Okay. That was Nancy Mace with some reporters. Now, I do want to get to this one reporter. He's a smug guy, but he was a smug ABC News journalismer, okay? And he was outside the Capitol and he ran up to Nancy Mace and she said, look, I'm not going to allow men in women's private spaces. They're vulnerable there. And I'm going to stand in the way of the radical left who thinks it's okay for a man to be in a woman's locker room, bathroom, or changing room. Let's take a listen to this one. I'm going to share this clip. This is the smug reporter, waiting for Nancy Mace to get out. And he thinks he's so smart. But she really ruined this guy's day with her response. So take a listen. Here we go.
Here she goes. Here's Congresswoman Mace. Congresswoman Mace, can I ask you a question as you walk here? So the question is, with your piece of legislation about banning women from using,
100% yes.
My question to you
And
is,
it doesn't go far enough. I'll be filing more bills.
you have said that it was created in response to Congresswoman-elect McBride.
100%. And
But should legislation be created targeted at one specific person?
It doesn't mention anyone in the legislation, but
You've said it was aimed at her.
No, I have said it's a result of this. I'm not going to allow biological men into women's private spaces. I will stand in the brink and stand in the way of anyone on the radical left who thinks that it's okay for a penis to be in a women's locker room or a bathroom or a changing room. Hell no. I am not going to stand for it. And the speaker said it would be in the House rules package. If it's not, I'll be ready with a motion, a privileged motion to force a vote on this. This is not okay. I'm a survivor of rape. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. And I'm not going to allow any man in any female private spaces.
Now, Speaker.
End of story. And by the way, I'm getting death threats from men pretending to be women. Why is it that these crazy people, the insanity, the radical left, are willing to kill women over a man's right to be in a women's restroom?
Speaker Johnson has said he wants to treat every new member with the words dignity and respect. Forcing this congressperson to go into a male restroom, is that dignity and respect?
Forcing women to share private spaces with men is not dignity and not respect. And I'm absolutely going to stand in the way of anyone who thinks it's okay for a man to be in our locker room, in our changing rooms, in our dressing rooms, in women's bathrooms. And in fact, if you agree with that, you're crazy. Because that's not okay. It's not okay.
Congresswoman,
Thank you, Congresswoman. We're going to peel away from this conversation, Kira. So a little bit of the context of what we were just talking about, and I'm going to have my cameraman step out of the active driveway here, was that Nancy Mace put forward this piece of legislation. It was aimed, she said, although the name is not in the legislation, at a new member of Congress, Sarah McBride of Delaware, who is a transgender woman. She has said that the legislation would prevent women from using male restrooms and vice versa in the United States Capitol. Speaker Johnson has said, he made a statement earlier today where he said he believes, quote, man is a man and woman is a woman, but he also called for, as you heard me ask the congressman about, dignity and respect for new members of Congress, and that would include this new member of Congress, Sarah McBride from Delaware, who is a transgender woman.
Okay. Lots to unpack here. This guy is just a hack. He's just a hacky, smug reporter. Just bottom line, much like sports, you don't see chicks who think they're dudes demanding to be allowed in men's bathrooms. You just don't. It's only these really strange men who think that they're women who want to go into women's spaces for whatever deranged reason. And like I said, you get the dignity and respect that any that any human gets, but always, for all of human history, for all of modern civilization, we have told men, if you stumble into the bathroom, the women's bathroom, we politely tell you, hey, you're in the women's bathroom. You have to leave. That is dignity and that is respect given to that individual. Hey, I could punch you in the face, but no, I'll give you the dignity and the respect. Actually, her coming up with legislative action here, a resolution, creating some guidelines here is dignity and respect, because she could just punch the guy in the face if he comes into the bathroom. That's her private space. I would think, have every right to do that. Can't we just get back to, hey, you've stumbled into the women's bathroom? No, no. Dignity and respect. That's the left's problem here. That's this reporter's problem. He thinks that they're not giving this transgender woman, this man who's pretending to be a woman, the dignity and respect that this person deserves. One, respect is earned. It's not given. Like, if you want my total respect, you're gonna have to earn it, right? I'll give you basic human decency. I won't punch you in the face when you get into the bathroom, but I'm gonna create legislative rules, and I'm gonna go about this diplomatically, and I'm going to be very clear that I don't want you in women's private spaces. And I don't think that you could get more respectful than that. She could have just said nothing and just punched the guy in the face when when entering the bathroom. I think that this is great. I mean, we're not even in a new term yet, and I want to appreciate the fact that we are winning. Democrats are still reeling over that loss, and the first thing that we do is come out with this bathroom issue and come up with this bathroom legislative action. Nancy Mace, and like I said, not a big fan of Nancy Mace. I'm glad that she's speaking out about this. She wouldn't have to speak out against this Sarah McBride character, because that's what these people are. Transgenderism, I just don't understand. You're playing. He's playing a part. Okay, he's a radical activist, and he's playing a part like in a theater. And she wouldn't have had to deal with this had he not been the first one. This is the first time this is happening at the Capitol and on Capitol grounds there, where you have to deal with the transgender person going into female spaces. I do need to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back talking about the Senate Judiciary Chair, Dick Durbin, touting Democrats' ability to expedite the confirming of these judges. How many have they confirmed? Is it close to what Donald Trump confirmed while he was in his term? We'll talk about it here next on Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every single day. I really wish we would be more focused on confirming these judges and these judge appointments. The Senate GOP really dropped the ball here, but for some odd reason, our focus is on the women's bathroom thing, which I'm not saying it shouldn't be. There definitely needs to be some sort of legislative action here on to deal with, because now we have the first ever elected Delaware a, a congressman, woman, she, Sarah McBride. So you do have to deal with that, but I wish our focus was more on this rather than that, because this is going to be more of a problem down the road for a lot more people. So the Senate Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin, yuck. He was touting the Democrats' ability to expedite confirming these judges prior to Inauguration Day. President-elect Donald Trump called on the Senate Republicans to show up and hold the line. This should be the top priority right now at the federal level in Congress. And in the Senate, Durbin highlighted that the vast majority, this is what he says, the vast majority, nearly 90%, this is what Dick Durbin says, of these confirmations have been bipartisan, meaning that there are Senate Republicans that like these picks. He couldn't be more wrong about that. There is no such thing as bipartisanship when it comes to Senate confirmations anymore, because they got rid of the filibuster for Senate confirmations or presidential nominees they got rid of the filibuster for presidential nominations for lower judges, lower courts. They got rid of it. Okay, so there is no bipartisanship. There's no debate going on. He says bipartisanship, and when he says bipartisanship, it means like a couple of Republicans, okay, a couple of weak-kneed shell of Republicans. They're not Republicans at all. They voted for some of these Senate confirmations, okay? What really needs to happen is these Senate Republicans get it to where these people are never called up for a vote, or they don't dare vote for the Senate Republicans at all, and they try to whip some of the votes because the Senate has right now a Democrat majority. They got to get some of those Democrats to vote against these picks, President Joe Biden's picks. So let's take a listen to this. This is Senator Dick Durbin talking about the confirmations and how many they're pushing through. I'm going to get to that number here in just a second, but this is really important because what liberals tend to do, as David Shostokis explained, they will use these radical judges legislatively. What they can't get done at the ballot box, they're going to get it done through the courts. Okay, so the abortion issue, liberals do this all of the time. Instead of having impartial judges, instead of them ruling based on the law, what they'll do is create, precedent, and they'll do it all through the courts rather than going to the ballot box and winning there. Take a listen to Dick Durbin touting, these are all bipartisan picks. Not true.
It's a story I hope you'll take. 90% of the judges that we are considering on the floor of the Senate, and I hope we'll be considering before the end of this session, were bipartisan.
Nope.
There was support from the Republican side.
Yeah, there was support from the Republican side, meaning like 2 Republicans probably voted for a couple of these nominations.
90% of them, including 3/4 of the nominees for the appellate court. It's been a hallmark of this administration working with the Judiciary Committee to try to find common ground. Many of these judges are.
This administration jailed their political opponent. Okay, there is no common ground. You jailed the opposition, Joe, or you tried to jail the opposition, and you weaponized the Justice Department against Donald Trump, and Matt Gaetz too, which we will get to. But take a listen.
Judges from red states, where the senators actually sat down with the White House and worked out differences. I think that is in the best spirit and the best history of this committee as well. We have other work to do, but I'm really proud of the fact that the Judiciary Committee, on a bipartisan basis, has met its constitutional responsibility.
All right. I do have to take a quick break, but we're going to talk about, okay, so 2 Republicans, actually, we'll take a look at this federal district judge for the Northern District of Illinois. Her name is April Perry. She was recently confirmed by the Senate. This is Joe Biden's pick. Now, you should know that she's a graduate of the Northwestern Pritzker School. I think that's kind of funny to point that out, but she's also radical. She worked in the office of a judge. His name is Joel Flom. Judge Joel Flom. He was in the United States Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit, a radical judge. We're going to get to that here in just a second. But I've got to take a quick break right now. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some of these Senate confirmations. This is the thing that these Senate Republicans should be focused on, is making it to where a couple of these Democrats don't vote on these nominations. But Joe Biden is nearing that number of how he's confirming a ton of his judges that he wants. I'll be right back. It's Conservative Cat. A big problem, folks. This is a huge problem. He's going to sit there and say bipartisan. There's no such thing as bipartisan anymore when it comes to confirming these judges, the presidential nominations for lower judges, because they got rid of the filibuster back during the Obama years. We're going to get to that, but April Perry, she's a federal district judge for the Northern District of Illinois. Constitutional attorney David Shostokis explained historically the losing party here, Liberal Party, if they lose their legislative power, they'll confirm radical judges because, and here's the quote, executive appointments like Attorney General or, the HHS, RFK Jr., Matt Gaetz, they could, right now, Joe Biden could put new people in there, but Trump could just fire them. So executive appointments don't matter as much. But these judges, they serve for life. Okay, so this is a really critical time to be, making these appointments. So they want to get all the judicial appointments that they possibly can get in before Joe leaves and the Republicans take over. You'll have these folks with the liberal mindset, and they will look at the Constitution as a living document. They'll look at the law as, suggestive. They'll say, oh, the law is the law. We can kind of change it with precedent. And if I rule this way, they won't rule based on the law. They just don't. That's what liberal judges do. You actually heard it in Pennsylvania. She says, who cares? We break the law all the time. We're going to count these illegal ballots. Why? Because we break the law all the time. The law is broken all the time. They honestly believe the law is a suggestion. These liberals, and they think that the Constitution is a living document and that it's not actually law and that you don't have to abide by it. So historically, the liberal community has always tried to find a way through the judiciary to do what they can't do at the ballot box. So right now, you've got this big push from Governor J.B. Pritzker with the Think Big America or whatever he's got cooking there, where he's trying to get abortion questions on the ballot and change constitutions in different states. So to where they allow abortion up to the 19th month or whatever, but they are trying to get the abortion question on the ballot and change state constitutions all across the nation. Okay, and that's difficult to do because you're spending a ton of money. They don't want to do this anymore, so they're going to get the courts to do their abortion bidding for them. And they're going to do what they can't do at the ballot box through the judiciary, which is the abortion issue. So April Perry, this is really interesting. She actually started her career as a law clerk for Judge Joel Flom, and it should be noted that she went to Pritzker School. Quite literally, if you look up April Perry, what is it? I want to look up the school that she went to. Yep, Pritzker Law School, Northern University, Pritzker School of Law. That's where she went to law school. Okay, so she went to Pritzker School of Law. So she actually started out as a law clerk for Judge Joel Flom in the United States Court of Appeals in the Seventh Circuit. So Flom, he's notably very pro-abortion in a lot of his rulings. So he ruled that an Indiana law that looked to prohibit abortions based on race, gender, and disability, which means if I'm a woman and I want an abortion, I can choose to have an abortion based on race, gender, and disability. If my child is disabled, it should be my choice to just off the child, right? And he is pro that. He says that women should be able to do that, where your elective abortion is based on those three things: race, gender, and disability. Woo! Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. These appointments are important because, and here's the thing, these judges serve for life, okay? They're making all of these judicial appointments, 217 so many, or is how many Joe Biden has actually gotten. Now, during Trump's time, they got 234. What they can't do through the ballot box, what they can't win at the ballot box, they're going to do through the judiciary. They're going to appoint a lot of these radical judges. These are not bipartisan judges. You get a couple of Republicans to vote for them, and they're rhinos anyway, and they've got dirt on them, and that's how they got them to vote for these appointments, or these vote yes to these nominations and to these appointments. April Perry, she is going to be a federal district judge in the Northern District of Illinois. She went to the Pritzker Law School. Okay. Now, she started her career out for this guy, Joel Flom. Joel Flom. He's the judge here in the United States Court of Appeals, the Seventh Circuit, and he's notably pro-abortion, like pro-abortion judge. And he actually ruled, this was pretty radical, and he's known for this. He ruled against an Indiana law that prohibited women getting abortions based on things like race. Okay, so you're having a baby as a woman, and you decide to get an abortion based on race, or the gender of the baby, or if the baby had a disability. That is the most disgusting thing. It's not really radical. I would say that, hey, women having abortions based on race, okay, you don't like the race of your baby, so you've decided to kill it, or you don't like the gender, oh man, I'm having a boy, I really didn't want a boy, I'm gonna kill the boy, I'm gonna get an abortion. Okay, so Indiana tried to outlaw that sort of behavior where women couldn't just get abortions because they didn't like the race or gender of their baby, or if the baby had a disability, they tried to get rid of that sort of thing. So, the big thing here is, you've got these radical judges, and what they're going to try to do is they're going to go through the judiciary, what they can't do at the ballot box. The Senate Democrats are pushing through Joe Biden's remaining nominees to the nation's courts before he leaves office, which is what they can do. They can do this. Constitutionally, because during the Obama eras, there was a change where the majority party, the Democrats, came up with this change, and they got rid of the filibuster when it came to lower courts or lower judges, and they got rid of the filibuster there. So there's this thing, it's called cloture, and it shuts off debate and it goes up to a vote right away. So it really isn't bipartisan. When he says it's bipartisan, it's really not. They don't have any sort of debate. They skip the debate. They just skip the filibuster, where you are supposed to get a certain amount of Republicans to say yes to the nominee, the minority party, but they can just push it through because they're majority party Democrat. So they're getting these nominees, and that is bad news. That is really bad news, because they are going to use the judiciary to get done what they can't do at a legislative level or at the ballot box. Now, Republicans, I want to be very clear, they did the same thing. They got rid of the filibuster when it came to the Supreme Court nominees, where they didn't have to have the minority party. So in 2020, when the Republicans responded, they responded with their own elimination of the Senate filibuster for Supreme Court nominees back in 2020, when they regained the House. Okay, so they got rid of the filibuster, or when they had the majority in the I think it was the House in 2020. Yeah. But they got rid of the filibuster and then they pushed through a lot of Trump's Supreme Court picks. That's how he was able to, of course, get the Supreme Court nominees voted on. So the Senate Judiciary Chair, Dick Durbin, he's saying, oh, it's bipartisan. It's not bipartisan. They got rid of the filibuster for this kind of stuff. You got a couple of Republicans coming out there and saying yes to people like April Perry, who probably is an extreme radical. If I had to guess, a radical judge, being that she worked for and started her career out with a radical judge, I would imagine she's probably pretty dang close to that. Now, she also went to school at the Northwestern University Pritzker of Law. I haven't seen anything really about her time. I know that she has a background in investigations as far as fraud and abuse prevention at GE Healthcare. She was senior counsel of global investigations of fraud, abuse prevention at GE Healthcare. But I don't know much about her other than her early career. She definitely was serving at the request of a liberal judge. This guy is pretty radical. I mean, the Indiana law that you shouldn't be getting abortions based off race. Like, what the hell? And Indiana tried to say, hey, no, women cannot get abortions based on race. They cannot sit there and say, oh, I'm getting an abortion because this baby's black or because this baby has autism. That's what they were trying to prohibit in Indiana. And this guy said, nope, women can just have abortions for whatever reason, and you can't limit that at all. So he's pretty radical, I would say, that judge that she worked for. So you guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll do it all over again tomorrow morning.